So hi Jay, welcome to Waterstones. We are in St James's Church in Piccadilly, which is
Very atmospheric.
very appropriate
Yeah.
for the Nevernight Chronicles. So you're here to talk about the third one. How do you feel now it's all over?
It's a little bit sad to say goodbye to it,
Yeah.
but I think I gave Mia the ending she deserved. I don't know. Readers will decide whether that's the case, but I feel like I gave her the send off that was appropriate. So it's sad to say goodbye, but I'm glad I said goodbye the way I did.
Okay, and because obviously, like from the very first page of the very first book, we know how Mia's story is going to end. So was
Right.
that the same for you writing it? You knew exactly where she was going to end up, or you knew that thing that happens on the first page had to happen to her in some way?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, she could have died at 90, surrounded by loved ones
Yeah.
or making love to the pool boy or something.
Exactly,
But,
a very Mia way to go.
no, I mean, I'm a plotter rather than a pantser, so I had a really rough idea of where the third book was going to go and how it was going to end. But I'm not quite clever enough to plot 3 books in advance, so
That's fair, yeah.
I tend to write a little bit by feel. So by the time I got to the third book, I had a pretty good idea of where it was going to go, but the end still surprised me a little bit.
Okay.
That's one of the things I like about writing the way I do. If the story or the characters surprise me as the author, then they're probably going to surprise the readers as well.
So did you build the world around Mia, or did Mia come first and then you built the world, and then you built the world around her?
Yeah, Mia came first, and the world came second. Mia was the product of me witnessing a drunken argument between 2 of my lady friends on New Year's Eve, like friends who are ladies, not lady friends, and it was about the use of the C-bomb and whether or not it was offensive, and I wisely stayed the hell out of that argument, but they both raised some really interesting points, so I went away the next day and kind of wrote a scene, and that scene ended up being the end of chapter 5, the discussion between Mia and Trick about the C-bomb. And at the end of that scene, I didn't really know who Mia was, but I wanted to find out, and so I wrote a book to discover who she was. So everything kind of came out of her.
So like kind of on that, the world draws a lot on like Roman structure with like the Senate and the gladiators.
Yep.
So what was your inspiration for creating it?
I mean, I'm a huge Roman history nerd. There's like 3 topics in the world that I can talk about with authority at a dinner party, and one of them is Roman history. It's not a very useful skill. But yeah, I've always loved Roman history ever since I was a little kid. So the idea of those structures came out of a thought experiment. I kind of asked myself what would happen if Julius Caesar's rebellion against the Senate failed. And Mia's father is kind of a pseudo-Caesar in that sense. He's a famous general who tried to overthrow the Senate, and he failed, and his family were punished for it. So that's kind of where her in the political scope of the book started.
Okay. And about the writing style, like this book trilogy is pretty well known for the footnotes, which I personally love. I don't know about anyone else. Yeah,
they're quite divisive.
Yeah, when did you decide to include them? Because as you find out in the third book, they're there for a very specific reason.
Right.
And did you know that from page 1?
I had a vague idea, but I didn't really know who the narrator was going to be when I started writing book 1. There were 3 possibilities.
Yeah.
And the front runner at the start of the series ended up not getting the Guernsey. It turned out to be someone different. But yeah, the footnotes are there. They serve 2 functions. One, they're there for levity. Hopefully they make you laugh, because it's a pretty... Oh, thanks. Good. Someone did. Otherwise, it would be a pretty grim and dark and morbid tale without them, I think. So they're there to inject a note of humour or a nervous giggle in a particularly morbid moment. But also, I grew up reading kind of doorstopper epic fantasies, like big, thick David Eddings style books. And I'm really into granular world building. I really like it, but I understand that some readers don't. So I thought by compartmentalizing that nitty-gritty stuff, if you don't like finding out why the sword fighting style is named what it is, or how the coinage of the realm works, don't care, you just want her to get to the assassin school, then you can skip all that stuff and you don't really miss anything in terms of the story. But if you're into that granular level of world building, then you can read the footnotes and get a little more out of it. So that was the idea anyway.
Okay. Well, yeah, because you also in the third book go kind of meta with the including some of the criticisms, which was a really interesting choice. Was that just kind of, you were like, oh, I know what I can do, when they were discussing the narrator of the book?
Yeah, I mean, I like to poke fun at myself a little bit as well. I think if you're taking yourself too seriously, then you can sometimes get lost in the woods. And so I try and check myself more than anything else. So that wasn't me making fun of the critiques. It was more me acknowledging the critiques. And trying not to take it all too seriously.
Okay, very nice. Well, now that Mia's story has come to an end, can you tell us a little bit about your next series? Yeah,
so my next epic fantasy series is called Empire of the Vampire, and that's going to be out next year. It's basically, how do I describe it? It's about a guy named Gabriel de Leon. He's a fallen paragon of a religious order that hunt vampires, and he lives in a world where the sunlight has essentially failed. So the sun is still there, but it's not as bright or harsh as it used to be, and that means vampires can walk around during the day. So the book is set 27 years after the first Day's death. It's called Day's death. And he's kind of telling his life story, how he reached that point. So he's kind of a broken, bitter, faithless man at the start of the tale, and we go back in time and explore how he got to that point. And it's a lot of fun to write. I'm having a lot of fun revisiting vampires. I was a huge vampire nerd when I grew up, and they kind of became something different over the course of my lifetime. Like, I grew up reading Interview with a Vampire, and vampires like Claudia and Lestat, and Salem's Lot by Stephen King was one of my favorite books of all time. And then vampires kind of became romantic figures. Not so much sparkly, but just they became different. They became less monsters. And I'm using this book to explore the idea of the nature of evil and the way immortality will make any morality erode. Everything kind of falls apart over time. So that's one of the themes of the book, that everything falls apart.
Nice cheerful theme.
It's a delightful read for the entire family.
Well, we're really looking forward to it at Waterstones especially. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.